Welcome to the detailed summary of the book The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Before we dive in, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that we can get motivation to share more amazing book summaries with you. And if you want us to upload the summary of any specific book, just put your comment below. Chapter 1. The heading of this chapter is No One's Crazy When It Comes to Money. People often think they are being logical, sensible, or careful. But when we look at what others do with money, it's easy to say, that's a terrible decision, or why would anyone do that? This chapter teaches us something simple yet powerful. No one is crazy. People make decisions about money based on the lessons life has taught them, and those lessons are different for everyone. Think about this. Money is deeply personal. It's tied to our emotions, fears, and hope. When someone chooses to save too much or spend too freely, it's usually because of what they've experienced. Maybe they grew up in poverty, where every small bill was a worry. Maybe they grew up in wealth, where spending wasn't something to fear. Neither person is crazy. Both are reacting to their reality, the world they know, the world that shaped them. Let's take two examples to understand this better. Imagine a person born in 1950 in America. When they were a young adult, they saw high inflation in the 1970s. Prices kept rising, the stock market went nowhere for years, and people struggled to keep up. That person might have grown up to think of the stock market as risky and dangerous. Now imagine someone born in 1985. When they became an adult, they saw the stock market mostly going up, technology companies booming, and wealth being created through investments. This person might feel very comfortable putting money into stocks or new business ideas, because their experience tells them that investing usually pays off. Here's the key: both people are shaped by what they lived through. Their views about money aren't based on facts alone, they're based on memories and feelings. That's why two smart people can look at the same financial decision and see it completely differently. Morgan Housel reminds us that what we think about money mostly comes from a very small sample of experience, what we've personally seen or felt. The financial disasters or opportunities that shaped us are probably different from the ones that shaped someone else. And because of that, no two people will ever think about money in exactly the same way. He gives an example of luck and timing. Bill Gates became one of the richest people in the world partly because he had access to a computer at a time when almost no one did. Was he brilliant? Yes. Did he work hard? Yes. But he was also incredibly lucky. Other kids, just as smart, didn't have the same chance. This chapter asks us to remember that before we judge someone's choices. If someone is terrified of debt, maybe it's because they saw a family member lose everything in a bankruptcy. If someone takes bold financial risks, maybe it's because they saw those risks pay off in their world. It doesn't mean they're foolish or reckless. It means they're human and they're trying to make sense of money based on what they know. And this chapter teaches us to reflect on ourselves too. We should ask, am I making money decisions that really fit my life today? Or am I stuck following old beliefs that came from my past? Sometimes, the way we handle money is shaped by fears or habits we don't even realize we have. In the end, no one is crazy about money. We're all just doing our best with the lessons we've gathered, lessons that might not apply to someone else's life at all. The more we understand that, the kinder we can be to others and the smarter we can be in our own choices. It would be great if you could also tell us where you watch from us. We love to know where our viewers come from. Chapter 2. The heading of this chapter is Luck and Risk when we see someone succeed. Maybe they build a big business, earn millions through investing, or become famous for their financial skills. It's natural to think they did it all through talent, hard work, and smart choices. And when someone fails or loses their money, we might think they made bad decisions or didn't try hard enough. But in this chapter, Morgan Housel shows us another truth. Luck and risk play a much bigger role in success and failure than most of us want to admit. Think about Bill Gates again. Yes, he's brilliant and hardworking. But one piece of luck changed everything. As a teenager, He went to one of the only high schools in America at that time that had a computer. That rare chance gave him the opportunity to learn programming long before most people had even seen a computer. If Gates had gone to another school without a computer, who knows what path his life would have taken. On the other hand, consider someone who started a small business with great ideas, good products, and lots of effort, but whose shop was destroyed by a flood or closed down because of an unexpected crisis. That person didn't fail because of poor decisions. They were hit by bad luck, plain and simple. Housel explains that we often overestimate how much success comes from skill and underestimate how much comes from luck. And when people fail, we're quick to blame their decisions without considering the role of risk, the chance that things outside their control went wrong. He uses a helpful image. Imagine two people playing a game. One rolls a normal dice. The other rolls loaded dice with better odds of winning. From the outside, it looks like they're playing the same game. But secretly, their chances of success are very different. In life and money, luck or risk are like those loaded dice. Some people have better chances because of things they can't control: where they were born, when they were born, who they met, what unexpected events helped or hurt them. This chapter invites us to stay humble about our wins. Yes, we should feel proud of our effort and smart choices. But we should also be grateful for the lucky breaks that helped us along the way. Maybe it was a supportive parent, a kind boss, a chance meeting, or just being in the right place at the right time. At the same time, it teaches us to be gentle when we see others struggle. Someone else's failure might not mean they made poor choices. It might mean they ran into risk that they couldn't control. And here's another important message from this chapter. Don't copy someone else's financial strategy just because it worked for them. Their success might have been helped by luck that you can't repeat. Your circumstances might be different, and what worked for them might not work for you. Finally, Housel encourages us to leave room for luck and risk in our own plans. We can't control every outcome, but we can plan in a way that protects us when luck doesn't go our way, by saving, preparing for emergencies, and not betting everything on one idea. In the end, this chapter helps us see that success and failure with money are never as simple as they look. Luck and risk are always part of the story, and the wise person knows how to respect both. Chapter 3. The heading of this chapter is Never Enough. In this chapter, Morgan Housel shines a light on one of the biggest traps people fall into when it comes to money. The idea that no matter how much you have, it's never enough. We often think, if I just had a little more, I'd feel secure. I'd feel successful. I'd be happy. But what happens is that when we get more, we start wanting even more than that. The goalpost keeps moving, and we find ourselves stuck in an endless chase. Housel tells us that having enough is one of the most powerful concepts in personal finance, and one of the hardest for people to accept. Many of us are taught to keep pushing, to never settle, to always aim higher. And while it's good to be ambitious, this can easily turn into greed. When we don't know where to stop, we take bigger and bigger risks, trying to reach some imagined level of wealth that will finally satisfy us. But often, that satisfaction never comes. The chapter gives the example of Rajat Gupta, a man who rose from poverty in India to become a wealthy and respected businessman in America. Gupta had everything: power, money, status. But he still wanted more. That desire led him to make risky, illegal choices that eventually ruined his career and sent him to prison. His story is a reminder that greed can destroy what you've already built, no matter how much you have. On the other hand, Housel tells us about people who understand the power of enough. These are people who decide, this is the level of comfort and security I need. I don't have to risk it all for more. They can sleep peacefully at night because they aren't constantly chasing the next big thing. This chapter encourages us to define what enough means for ourselves. Not what society says, not what other people have, but what you need to feel safe, happy, and free. When we know our enough, we can stop comparing ourselves to others, stop taking unnecessary risks, and start enjoying what we've already achieved. Housel also points out that comparison is one of the biggest reasons people feel like they don't have enough. In today's world, it's easy to see what other people have: their cars, their houses, their vacations, and think, I need that too. But there will always be someone with more. If you measure your success by someone else's, you'll never feel satisfied. The key message here is this: knowing when you have enough gives you power. It helps you protect what you've built. It helps you avoid greed-driven mistakes. And it helps you focus on what truly matters: peace of mind, health, family, and freedom. In the end, this chapter is a reminder that the endless chase for more can leave us empty and vulnerable. But knowing when to stop and being grateful for what we have can bring true wealth, the kind that isn't measured in dollars alone. Chapter 4. The heading of this chapter is Confounding Compounding. In this chapter, Morgan Housel focuses on one of the most powerful and often misunderstood forces in building wealth: compounding. Compounding is the simple idea that small gains, added up over time, can grow into something huge. What's amazing, and what often confuses people, is just how big the results of compounding can become, especially when we give it enough time to work its magic. Housel explains that compounding isn't just about getting good returns on your money, it's about earning returns on your returns. When your investments make a profit, and then that profit itself earns a profit, and so on, the growth begins to snowball. At first, the growth might seem slow and small. But over many years or decades, the results can be enormous, bigger than most people imagine. One of the best examples Housel gives is Warren Buffett. Today, Buffett is one of the richest people on earth, famous for his skill as an investor. But here's something most people overlook: the biggest reason for his wealth isn't just that he's a great investor, it's that he's been a great investor for a very long time. Buffett started investing as a young boy and kept at it for over 75 years. The real magic is in how long he let compounding work for him. If Warren Buffett had started investing later in life, or if he had stopped early, he'd still be wealthy, but nowhere near the level he reached. His story teaches us that time matters more than almost anything else in building wealth. You don't need to find the highest possible returns or take huge risks. What you need is to start early, stay consistent, and let compounding do its quiet work in the background. But here's the challenge: compounding rewards patience, and patience is hard. In the early years, the growth seems slow, almost invisible. It can feel boring. We're tempted to chase quick wins, take shortcuts, or give up. That's why many people struggle to benefit fully from compounding. They don't give it enough time. Housel encourages us to change how we think about wealth building. Instead of focusing only on finding the best investment or the highest return, we should focus on staying invested for the long haul. Small, steady gains, repeated over many years, will beat short-term bursts of success. Another key point in this chapter is that compounding doesn't just apply to money. It applies to relationships, skills, knowledge, and health. Small actions, done consistently over time, can lead to big results in all areas of life. The challenge is sticking with those small actions long enough to see the big reward. In the end, this chapter teaches us that compounding is simple, but not easy. It requires patience, consistency, and trust in the process. If we can give compounding enough time, it can help us build wealth far beyond what we might expect. Not through luck or genius, but through the quiet power of time. Chapter 5. The heading of this chapter is Getting Wealthy versus Staying Wealthy. In this chapter, Morgan Housel highlights a truth that many people overlook. The skills you need to get wealthy are not always the same as the skills you need to stay wealthy. Building wealth often requires risk-taking, optimism, and boldness. But keeping wealth and making sure it lasts requires something different: caution, humility, and a strong desire to protect what you've built. Think of it like this: to build wealth, you have to be willing to take chances. Entrepreneurs who start businesses, investors who put money into new ideas, and people who step outside of the safe path often create wealth by doing things that others are afraid to try. They see opportunity and they act, sometimes taking big risks because they believe those risks will pay off. But once you have wealth, your priorities need to change. Now, the goal is to survive, to protect what you have from loss. That's where humility and fear of losing come in. Housel points out that survival is the most important part of any financial plan. It doesn't matter how big your gains are if you lose it all in the end. He gives the example of people who became rich during booming markets but lost everything because they kept taking bigger and bigger risks, believing the good times would never end. The danger comes when people who've won the game forget to stop playing with the same level of risk that helped them win in the first place. This chapter also reminds us that no one stays rich by being right all the time. Staying wealthy means being careful enough to avoid the kind of mistakes that wipe you out. It means understanding that luck helped you get here, and bad luck could take it away if you're not careful. Housel compares getting wealthy to running up the score in a game. It's about making gains, pushing forward, and trying to grow. But staying wealthy is about playing defense. It's about making sure you don't lose what you've already earned. Another important lesson from this chapter is about flexibility. People who stay wealthy over the long term are usually those who can adjust their plans when the world changes. They aren't stubborn. They know that what worked before might not work forever. Finally, Housel teaches that the most important financial skill isn't finding the next great investment or the next big opportunity. It's learning to survive. If you can survive, you give yourself the chance to grow, to recover from mistakes, and to benefit from the power of time and compounding. In short, this chapter reminds us that getting rich and staying rich are two different games. Both require different mindsets, and the smartest financial move we can make is to know when it's time to shift from offense to defense, from taking bold risks to protecting what we have. Chapter 6. The heading of this chapter is Tails. You win. In this chapter, Morgan Housel shares a surprising idea. In both investing and life, most of our success comes from just a small number of big wins, what he calls the tail events. A tail event is something rare and powerful that makes an outsized impact on the final result. It's that one decision, that one investment, that one opportunity that makes all the difference, even if many other things didn't work out along the way. Let's take the example of a stock market investor. Housel points out that in many cases, the huge returns of the stock market over time come from just a handful of companies. If you look at the history of the stock market, a tiny percentage of stocks produce the majority of the gains. Companies like Apple, Amazon, Microsoft. These are the tail events. They delivered massive growth that covered up for many other companies that failed or did just okay. This idea isn't just about investing. It applies to many parts of life. Think about a business owner who tries lots of ideas. Most of those ideas won't work. But one idea might become the foundation of a company that changes their life. Or think about relationships. We meet many people in our lives, but a small number of those connections will become the friendships or partnerships that truly shape us. Housel encourages us to see that failure and small setbacks are not a sign that we're on the wrong path. In fact, they're often part of the journey toward a tail event, that rare, powerful success that can change everything. The key is to keep going long enough, and to stay open to opportunities, so that we give ourselves a chance to catch those big wins. This chapter also teaches us that when we look at successful people, we often miss the full picture. We see their big wins, but we don't see all the small losses, the attempts that didn't work, or the ideas that failed. But those failures weren't pointless. They were steps on the road to the success that mattered. Another lesson here is that we shouldn't try to avoid all failure. If we're so afraid of small losses that we never take action, we might miss out on the few big wins that could make all the difference. Allowing room for errors and small losses is the price we pay to stay in the game long enough to experience a tail event. In the end, this chapter teaches us that in both money and life, a small number of extraordinary successes can outweigh many ordinary or failed efforts. Our job is to keep trying, stay patient, and give ourselves the chance to catch those rare and powerful moments when they come. Chapter 7. The heading of this chapter is Freedom. In this chapter, Morgan Housel talks about something that many people overlook when they think about wealth. The greatest value of money isn't in buying things, it's in buying control over your own time. In short, money gives you freedom. We often think of being rich as having fancy cars, big houses, expensive clothes, or exotic vacations. But Housel explains that true wealth, the kind that actually brings happiness, is the ability to wake up and say, I can do what I want today. It's about having choices. It's about being able to spend your time the way that makes you happiest, instead of always having to do what someone else tells you. Imagine this. You have enough savings or steady income that you don't need to take a job you hate just to pay the bills. You can take a day off when you need to. You can spend time with your family or pursue hobbies that matter to you. That feeling, the ability to control your time, is one of the deepest forms of happiness money can bring. Housel points out that many people chase money because they think more stuff will make them happy. But often, what really makes people happy is having more control over their time. And the best part is that this kind of freedom doesn't always require being super rich. Even a small amount of savings can give you breathing room, space to make choices that serve you, not just your bills or your boss. He also reminds us that without freedom, even large amounts of money can feel empty. If you have a high-paying job but no time to enjoy life, or if you're constantly stressed and rushed, that wealth won't bring the happiness you hoped for. True wealth is about independence, the ability to say, I can choose. This chapter invites us to think about what we really want from money. Is it to impress others? Or is it to buy the most valuable thing money can offer, freedom? Housel encourages readers to focus on saving and managing money in a way that helps them gain this freedom. Instead of spending to look rich, aim to build financial security that gives you the power to control your time. That's where real satisfaction comes from. In the end, this chapter teaches us that money's highest purpose is to give you control over your life. When you have that, you have something more valuable than any luxury item. You have the freedom to live on your terms. Chapter 8. The heading of this chapter is The Man in the Car Paradox. In this chapter, Morgan Housel uncovers a surprising truth about why people buy expensive things and how those things are actually seen by others. He calls it the man in the car paradox. The idea is simple. When you see someone driving a fancy car, you might admire the car, but you don't usually admire the person driving it. Think about it. When you see someone in a luxury car, your first thought is usually, wow, what a nice car. You might even imagine yourself in that car. But rarely do you think, wow, what an amazing person they must be. The focus is on the car, not the driver. Housel explains that many people spend money on expensive things because they hope it will earn them respect or admiration. They believe that showing wealth through cars, watches, clothes, or houses will make others look up to them. But the paradox is that it doesn't usually work that way. People admire the item, not the owner. This chapter invites us to rethink why we want certain things. If our goal is to impress people or gain their respect, spending on flashy items is often a waste. People don't think about us nearly as much as we imagine. They're usually thinking about themselves. Housel points out that true respect and admiration come from how you treat others, not what you own. People admire kindness, humility, honesty, and generosity far more than they admire a car or a suit. And the best part is, those qualities don't cost a penny. Another valuable insight from this chapter is that trying to display wealth often creates pressure to keep spending. If you start trying to show off, you feel the need to keep up appearances, buying more and more to maintain the image. This can trap you in a cycle of spending that doesn't actually bring you closer to happiness or respect. Instead, Housel encourages us to focus on building quiet confidence and financial security. Rather than chasing admiration through things, work on building a life where you feel good about yourself, where you don't need to seek approval from others. In the end, the man in the car paradox teaches us that buying things to impress others rarely works the way we hope. People may admire the things you own, but real respect comes from who you are, not what you show off. Chapter 9. The heading of this chapter is Wealth is What You Don't See. In this chapter, Morgan Housel helps us see a simple but powerful truth. Real wealth is often invisible. What most people think of as wealth, the big house, the fancy car, the expensive clothes, is really just a display of spending. True wealth is the money you don't spend. It's the savings, the investments, and the financial security that stays quietly in the background. Housel explains that when we see someone with lots of expensive things, we often assume they must be rich. But what we're actually seeing is money that's already been spent. That person may have lots of money, or they may have very little left because they've used it to buy those visible signs of success. The real wealth they might have had is gone, traded for things to show to the world. This chapter teaches us to stop confusing spending with wealth. Just because someone appears to have a lot, doesn't mean they truly do. And just because someone lives modestly doesn't mean they aren't wealthy. In fact, the quiet saver, the person who lives below their means and builds up assets in the background, may be far wealthier than the person who flashes their riches. Another key idea in this chapter is that saving money gives you options. It gives you freedom, security, and the ability to handle surprises. And because real wealth is invisible, it's easy to overlook its importance. We admire the visible signs of success, but the hidden savings are what actually provide lasting comfort and power. Housel invites us to change how we define wealth. Rather than focusing on what people show, focus on what they keep. Wealth isn't about impressing others. It's about creating a life where you feel safe and in control, where you have choices, and where you aren't living paycheck to paycheck just to keep up appearances. He also reminds us that the temptation to spend in order to look rich is strong, especially in a world where we constantly see others showing off what they have. But falling into that trap can rob us of real financial security. The goal, Housel suggests, is not to look wealthy, but to be wealthy, and that usually means quietly saving and investing behind the scenes. In the end, this chapter teaches us that true wealth is silent, steady, and unseen. It's not in the things you show the world. It's in the things you quietly build that give you peace of mind, freedom, and strength for the future. Chapter 10. The heading of this chapter is Save Money. In this chapter, Morgan Housel shares one of the simplest but most powerful ideas about building wealth. Saving money is the most important financial habit you can have. It sounds basic, but it's often overlooked. Many people focus so much on earning more or finding the perfect investment that they forget how crucial plain old saving is. Housel explains that saving money gives you control over your life. When you save, you build flexibility and security. You create space to handle emergencies, to take opportunities when they come, and to sleep better at night because you know you're prepared. And here's the best part. You don't need to be a genius investor or have a high-paying job to build wealth if you're a good saver. This chapter reminds us that wealth has little to do with what you earn and a lot to do with what you keep. We often admire people who have high incomes, but income alone doesn't make someone rich. There are plenty of high earners who spend everything they make, or more, and have little or no true wealth. On the other hand, someone with a modest income who saves steadily can build real financial strength over time. Housel also points out that saving doesn't require a special reason. You don't need to save only for retirement, or for a house, or for college fees. Saving just to have options, just to give your future self more freedom, is reason enough. Life is full of surprises, good and bad. When you have savings, you're ready for both. Another key message in this chapter is that saving is about mindset. It's about recognizing that spending less than you earn, even when you could afford to spend more, gives you power. It lets you control your time, your choices, and your future. Housel encourages us to see saving not as a sacrifice, but as a way of buying independence. Every dollar saved is a dollar that can work for you later. And even small amounts saved regularly can grow into something meaningful, especially when combined with time and compounding. In the end, this chapter teaches us that saving is the foundation of wealth. It doesn't matter how brilliant your investment plan is if you don't have savings to invest. And it doesn't matter how high your income is if you spend it all. The real secret to building wealth starts with the simple, steady habit of saving. Chapter 11. The heading of this chapter is Reasonable Rational. In this chapter, Morgan Housel offers a refreshing and practical idea. When it comes to money, it's better to aim for what's reasonable for you than to chase what's perfectly rational on paper. The smartest financial plan isn't the one that looks best in a spreadsheet or a math formula, it's the one you can stick with over the long run. Housel explains that financial decisions are not made in a vacuum. We are emotional creatures, not robots. We all have fears, hopes, habits, and unique circumstances that shape how we think about money. A plan that looks mathematically perfect might be impossible for you to follow if it keeps you awake at night or goes against your personality. For example, the rational choice might be to invest 100% of your savings in stocks because, over time, stocks have historically given the highest returns. But if seeing your money's value swing wildly up and down makes you anxious or keeps you from sleeping well, that plan isn't reasonable for you. A more balanced mix of investments, even if it earns slightly less over time, could actually work better because you're more likely to stick with it. Housel emphasizes that consistency beats perfection. A financial strategy that feels comfortable, that you can follow through good times and bad, will always outperform a brilliant plan that you abandon when the going gets tough. This chapter also reminds us that personal finance is, as the name suggests, personal. There's no single right way to manage money that fits everyone. What works for your friend, neighbor, or favorite finance guru might not be right for you. What matters is finding an approach that fits your values, your goals, and your emotional comfort level. Housel encourages us not to feel pressured by what looks best on paper or by what others are doing. Instead, he invites us to build a plan that we can live with for decades, because that's how wealth grows, slowly, steadily, and patiently. In the end, this chapter teaches us that being reasonable is smarter than trying to be perfectly rational. The goal isn't to win the math game. The goal is to build a life of security, peace, and freedom by making choices you can stick with year after year. Chapter 12. The heading of this chapter is Surprise. In this chapter, Morgan Housel talks about something we often forget when thinking about money and planning for the future. The most important events that shape our financial lives are the ones we don't see coming. History is full of surprises, events that no one predicted, or that very few people saw coming at the time. And these surprises are often the things that change everything. Think about the 2008 financial crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, or the sudden rise of new technologies like the internet or smartphones. Before they happened, most people didn't expect these events, or didn't realize how big their impact would be. But once they arrived, they changed the world, including the way we earn, save, invest, and spend money. Housel explains that this pattern, of big, unexpected events shaping our future, happens over and over again. And yet, when we make financial plans, we often act as if the future will look just like the past. We try to predict what will happen, or we rely too much on what worked before, forgetting that surprises are part of the story. This chapter encourages us to stay humble about what we think we know. The future is always partly unknown. No matter how much research we do or how carefully we plan, there will be things we can't predict. That's why it's so important to leave room in our plans for the unexpected, to save a little more, to avoid taking on too much risk, and to stay flexible so we can adjust when surprises happen. Housel also points out that progress often comes from surprises too. Many of the greatest inventions, discoveries, and opportunities came from unexpected moments. So while surprises can bring challenges, they can also bring chances for growth and success. The key lesson from this chapter is that the future will surprise us, and that's normal. Rather than trying to predict every detail, our job is to build financial plans that can handle the unknown. Plans that can survive both good surprises and bad ones. In the end, this chapter teaches us that staying open-minded, cautious, and ready for change is one of the smartest things we can do with our money, because life will always have surprises waiting. Chapter 13. The heading of this chapter is Room for Error. In this chapter, Morgan Housel teaches us about the importance of having a margin of safety in our financial lives. He calls this idea room for error, the space we leave in our plans to account for the unexpected. Because as we've learned from the previous chapter, surprises happen. No matter how carefully we plan, the future won't always go the way we hope. Think of it this way. Imagine building a bridge that can hold exactly the weight of the cars expected to cross it, with no extra strength built in. That bridge might work fine most of the time, but one unexpected heavy truck could cause it to collapse. That's why engineers always design bridges with extra strength, a safety margin. Housel explains that we should think about our money the same way. When we create a budget, a savings plan, or an investment strategy, we shouldn't aim for a plan that works only if everything goes perfectly. We should aim for a plan that can survive bad luck, unexpected expenses, market crashes, job loss, or even our own mistake. Leaving room for error isn't about being negative or expecting failure. It's about being realistic. Life is full of uncertainty. Even if the odds are in your favor, there's always a chance that things will go wrong. A good plan respects that reality. This chapter encourages us to avoid overconfidence. It's tempting to believe that we can predict the future, or that because something has worked in the past, it will always work. But overconfidence can lead us to take on too much risk, or to assume we don't need a backup plan. Housel reminds us that room for error buys us time and flexibility. When things don't go as planned and eventually something won't, having that margin means we can recover, adjust, and keep moving forward without disaster. The key message of this chapter is simple but powerful. Don't aim for a plan that works only in the best-case scenario. Aim for one that can survive the worst case too. That's how you build financial resilience. In the end, this chapter teaches us that being prepared for uncertainty isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of wisdom. The more room for error you give yourself, the stronger and safer your financial future will be. Chapter 14. The heading of this chapter is You'll Change. In this chapter, Morgan Housel highlights a truth that most of us rarely stop to think about. What we want today is not always what we'll want in the future. Our goals, dreams, and desires change as we grow, learn, and experience new things. This is normal, but it creates a challenge when we make long-term financial decisions based on what feels right today. Housel explains that many of the big choices we make with money, buying a house, saving for retirement, investing in a certain way, are based on assumptions about what will make us happy or satisfied years or even decades from now. But the problem is, our future self might feel very differently from the person we are today. Think about what you wanted when you were a teenager compared to what you want now. Chances are, many of your priorities have changed. The same will likely happen as you move through each stage of life. What feels like the perfect plan today might not fit your future self at all. This chapter teaches us to stay flexible and humble in our financial planning. Rather than locking ourselves into decisions that assume we'll never change, we should give ourselves room to adjust as our values, goals, and circumstances shift. Housel also warns us about the danger of chasing goals that belong to our past self. Sometimes we keep working towards something simply because it once felt important, even though it no longer brings us joy or meaning. This can lead to frustration, wasted effort, and even regret. One of the wisest things we can do, Housel suggests, is to check in with ourselves regularly. Ask, is this still what I want? Does this still fit the person I'm becoming? And if the answer is no, don't be afraid to change course. This chapter encourages us to see financial plans as living things, not rigid structures set in stone, but flexible guides that can grow and change with us. That's how we build a money life that truly serves who we are at every stage. In the end, this chapter teaches us that it's okay to change your mind as you change your life. The key is to build plans that can adapt along the way, because the person you are today is only one chapter in your story. Chapter 15. The heading of this chapter is Nothing's Free. In this chapter, Morgan Housel helps us understand a key idea that's easy to forget. Everything in life, including financial success, comes with a price. Nothing is truly free, even if the cost isn't always paid in cash. When people think about investing or building wealth, they often focus on the rewards, the returns, the profits, the growth. But Housel points out that those rewards always come with a cost, and the cost isn't always obvious. For example, the price of earning high returns in the stock market isn't just the money you put in, it's the emotional cost of dealing with volatility, fear, and uncertainty. It's the stress of watching your investments go up and down, sometimes sharply, and having the strength to stay the course. Many people try to avoid paying this price. They look for shortcuts or guarantees, a way to get the rewards without facing the risks, the stress, or the discomfort. But the truth is, those shortcuts don't exist. If you want the gains, you have to be willing to pay the price that comes with them. Housel compares this to going to a theme park. You don't complain about the price of the ticket when you enter, because you know it's the cost of enjoying the rides. The same goes for building wealth. If you want to enjoy the rewards, you have to accept the price, the emotional ups and downs, the patience required, and the uncertainty along the way. This chapter encourages us to stop seeing volatility or uncertainty as something unfair. Instead, we should see it as the fee we pay for long-term success. And once we accept that fee, we can stop fearing it so much. We can stop trying to avoid normal market ups and downs, and focus on staying the course. Another key point Housel makes is that the price of wealth isn't paid just once. It's ongoing. Every time the market dips, or an investment feels shaky, or the future looks uncertain, we're paying that price again. And that's okay. It's part of the process. In the end, this chapter teaches us that every reward in finance has a cost, and if you want the reward, you need to be willing to pay it. The most successful people aren't the ones who avoided the price. They're the ones who accepted it and stayed the course anyway. Chapter 16. The heading of this chapter is You and Me. In this chapter, Morgan Housel highlights an important truth about how we view money and make financial decisions. Different people play different financial games, and that means what works for one person might not work for another. Every person has unique goals, time frames, and personal situations that shape their decisions about saving, spending, and investing. Someone who is 25 years old and investing for retirement 40 years down the road is playing a very different game than someone who is 60 years old and needs their money to be safe and accessible soon. Someone saving for a down payment on a house in 2 years will make very different choices from someone who's investing with no specific goal except to grow wealth for decades. Housel warns us that problems can happen when we copy the strategies or ideas of people who are playing a different game. For example, we might see a famous investor or businessperson make a bold move, like putting a huge amount of money into a risky startup or a single stock, and feel tempted to do the same. But what we don't always realize is that this person's financial situation, goals, or tolerance for risk could be completely different from ours. What makes sense for them might be a disaster for us. Another key point is about how short-term players and long-term players think differently. Someone who's trading stocks daily is focused on short-term movements and quick gains. But someone investing for retirement decades away shouldn't be worried about those day-to-day ups and downs. Yet, thanks to news headlines, social media, and conversations with others, long-term investors often feel pulled into the mindset of short-term players, and that can lead to poor decisions. This chapter encourages us to stay focused on our own game. Ask yourself, what are my goals? What is my time horizon? What risks am I comfortable with? Then, build a plan that fits those answers, and resist the temptation to get distracted by what others are doing. Housel also reminds us that it's okay for different people to have different strategies. There is no single, right way to manage money that applies to everyone. What matters is whether the strategy fits you. In the end, this chapter teaches us that personal finance is just that, personal. The smartest thing we can do is to know our own game, play it well, and not get caught up trying to copy people who are playing a completely different one. Chapter 17. The heading of this chapter is The Seduction of Pessimism. In this chapter, Morgan Housel explains why pessimism, focusing on bad news, risks, and dangers, often sounds smarter and more believable than optimism. When people talk about problems, disasters, and things going wrong, we tend to take them seriously. But when someone talks about hope, progress, or good outcomes, we often think they're being naive or unrealistic. Why is that? Housel points out that bad things often happen fast and feel intense. A market crash can happen overnight. A company can fail suddenly. A natural disaster can strike in an instant. These events grab our attention because they're immediate, clear, and painful. Good things, on the other hand, often take time. Progress is slow. Building wealth, improving health, creating technology. These are things that happen little by little, often without big headlines. And because good news tends to grow quietly, it doesn't always feel as urgent or believable as bad news. Another reason pessimism feels smarter is because it sounds cautious and thoughtful. Saying this could go wrong makes you seem like you're paying attention and being careful. But the truth is, while bad things happen, history shows that progress usually wins over time. The world improves bit by bit, even if the journey is full of bumps along the way. Housel encourages us not to let the natural pull of pessimism make us afraid to take reasonable risks or to believe in the future. If we only focus on what might go wrong, we might miss out on opportunities to grow, to invest, and to build a better life. This chapter teaches us to be realistic. Yes, bad things happen, and we should be prepared for them. But we should also remember that the long-term story of money, markets, and the world is one of improvement. People create solutions. Markets recover. Technology advances. In the end, this chapter reminds us that while pessimism may sound smarter in the moment, optimism, combined with caution and preparation, is what builds success over the long run. Chapter 18. The heading of this chapter is When You'll Believe Anything. In this final chapter, Morgan Housel dives into an interesting part of human nature. When something happens in the world of money, especially something dramatic, people want a story to explain it. We don't like uncertainty. We want reasons. We want to feel like we understand why things happen the way they did. But here's the challenge. Money, markets, and economies are incredibly complex. There are so many forces at play, most of which we can't see or fully understand. Yet when big events happen, like a market crash, a sudden rise in housing prices, or a surprising business failure, people rush to create simple explanations. Housel points out that we are often quick to believe these simple stories because they make us feel in control. When we can point to a cause, we feel like we can predict what might happen next or protect ourselves in the future. But these stories are often incomplete or even wrong because they leave out the messy, complicated reality of how the world works. For example, after a market crash, you'll hear explanations like, "It was caused by interest rates," or "It was due to political decisions." Maybe those things played a part, but usually it's a mix of many factors. Luck, emotions, hidden risks, coming together in ways that no one could fully predict. This chapter encourages us to be careful about the stories we believe. Simple answers can be comforting, but they can also give us a false sense of security or control. It's wiser to accept that sometimes things happen for reasons that are complex, random, or unknowable. Housel also reminds us that people, including financial experts, aren't immune to this. Everyone wants to sound confident and wise, so they offer neat explanations even when the truth is messy. As readers and investors, we have to learn to live with uncertainty and to be okay with not always having a clear story. In the end, this chapter teaches us that humility is one of the most important tools we can bring to our financial lives. We won't always have perfect answers, but by staying thoughtful, cautious, and open-minded, we can make better decisions even when the reasons behind events aren't fully clear.